Yumnah. I'm 16 years old, and I'm the writer of the winning work for the 2020 Young Authors Award program. I currently go to St. John's International School, and I just finished my GCSEs recently in November. And I'm still waiting for the results, which will probably come out in about 2 weeks' time, and so I'm quite nervous and excited at the same time. So yeah, that's who I am. I was just browsing around on YouTube and, doing some free time, and I watched a video on a girl who was going through past life regression hypnosis, and she said that in her past life she was a Kisang, and I didn't know what that was, so I got super curious and I started looking up a lot of things on what Kisang were, and I found that they were these lovely performers in history, and I saw their pictures and I thought they looked super mesmerizing, and I just wanted to know more about them. And I started reading up a lot on them, and I thought they had how did more people not know about them? And I really thought that it was magical, and it didn't feel like they were real. It felt like it came out straight from a fairy tale, right? And so I thought it would be a great concept to write a story about, and it would be something great to write something descriptive about, because they were really beautiful. And so that's where the inspiration for it came from. So usually when I write, I don't like to plan out things very much, because I like to leave some room for that spontaneous burst of creativity. But with this piece of work in particular, I think it was a good choice to plan it out a little more, because I think, when you write it spontaneously, it kind of comes out in a more unorganized and unstructured way. So what I first did was plan out the settings, because I think it's really important to feel fully immersed in what you're writing about. And so I try to picture the setting and describe the setting and feel as a writer that I'm actually in that place and I'm watching all these events unfold. And then I would move on to writing the overall storyline and kind of like the blurb, and figure out what is actually going to happen and what the main part of the story is going to be. And then I cut it up into the chapters, and I figure out what's going to happen in which chapter and how it's all going to tie together. And then lastly, I plan out what kind of characters are going to be living that story, and what kind of archetypes they fall into, what behaviors they have, how they would act. And I like to base my characters on real people, so that I could make it more realistic, and I could think, oh, if this person was in that situation, how would they react? And so yeah, I think that was the process for writing that story. Because the piece was set in history, I didn't want there to be too many contradictions, and I really wanted to make sure that there was at least some form of historical accuracy, even though it's a fictional piece. So I think there was a lot of research that had to be done, because I thought that I knew enough, but I think there were a lot of things that I just realized that I didn't know about, like little minor things about the culture and the history, that if they weren't fitted properly into the story, I think it wouldn't feel as real, and it wouldn't have that genuine essence of the setting. And so like cultural elements, traditional elements, things about like how society viewed the character and how the character viewed society, the royal system, all those things took a lot of research. And how I overcame that was I tried to spend a lot of time doing that research, and I used a lot of I like to use websites, but I think they get boring very quickly. So I think an underrated way of doing research is by actually watching more historically accurate dramas or movies with a notepad, and just kind of note the little things that seem very minor, but they add life to the story, like the outfits or the way people talk, and people's behaviors, like the little things that may be culturally different. You're like, oh, I don't see people every day doing that. That must be a cultural thing. And so I take notes of those things, and I try to slide them into the story as best as I could. at this moment, I haven't really got anything in mind. I'm just like, taking a break. It's school holiday. But I did want to enter more competitions, and I'm always open to entering new competitions. And so if anything like that comes up, I'll be sure to be the first to enter and to do my best. Yeah, that's it. I'll give you 3 tips that I think are very important and that you shouldn't forget if you're a young author trying to pursue your passion for writing. And the first tip would be to find an inspiration or a passion. It can be a person, so like a writer that you really admire, or someone whose work you really admire, or maybe a hobby or something that you really like to do, and a passion which won't die out. If you wrote a couple stories on it and it didn't really work out, you still would like that thing. And so you could use this inspiration for your stories, but you could also use this inspiration for yourself as an author. What kind of work do you want to produce, and what kind of author do you want to be known for? And second is, don't force yourself to write. There is some days, there are just those days where you don't feel like writing. And if you force yourself to write on those days, whatever comes out won't be as great. And you look at it later and think, oh, what was I thinking? But on days when you do feel like writing, just brain dump. Like, get everything out of there. Write whatever you want to write. Don't think about it. And then later on, and this is the last tip, the editing process is the most important process, not actually the writing. The writing is just getting everything in your head out there. But the editing process, I always recommend editing it. If you write it today, edit it tomorrow, so that you can look at it with fresh eyes, and always ask other people to think, read it through and get their thoughts on that, because sometimes you may love your writing so much, but other people are like, I don't get anything that you wrote. And so you always want to be receptive to criticism and try to build yourself from that. I think regardless, there's that act of separating the art from the artist. And so always, like, if your work isn't the best, it doesn't mean that you're not capable of doing your best. And so I think if you view your work as a masterpiece or as an art piece, there's always going to be something that can be improved. And so instead of viewing it as, oh, my work is not good, that's why I need to fix it, just view it as, my work is already good, I just need to make it way better. And I think that telling yourself good things about your work really helps you be more receptive to when other people criticize it, because you're like, okay, they have a different opinion, but I trust myself and I know that I can write my best. And if I take their opinion on top of that, I could be even better. And so, yeah, I think that's a good way to deal with that. Luscious hills of fresh camellia flowers laid out upon the land, littering the landscape with uncompromising hues of deep green and bright pink. Baby blue blossoms lined the path down to the gates of the Kyobang. Colored flags, raised up high in celebration of the recital about to take place, guarded the entrances like soldiers. It was here where the Kiseng performers trained and lived, at the Institution of Arts in 16th century Joseon. Days on end, they danced relentlessly with the hopes of performing for the king one day. But for now, these young girls were to hold a performance much different to those performed in the royal courts. Instead, they were to perform a masterpiece, one embedded into the history of Joseon. It was a piece which gathered both the rich and the poor alike, eliciting tears from both the young and the old. It was the dance of the fallen moon. Cheers erupted from the crowd as the Kiseng, dressed in embroidered silk, flung their patent ribbons into the air. In perfect synchronicity with the musicians that strummed on their kayagum, they began their dance. Their pointed toes guided all their movements. It was as if they were weightless. The wind blowing through the hills carried the flow of their movements so gracefully, and every eye could not look away. A bittersweet, mellow melody filled the Kyobang, delivering the tale of the fallen moon. It was a sorrowful myth, where the moon in the night sky could not save the people swallowed by the seas due to its tides. The moon, regardless of its size and its gravitational force, could not do anything but watch the deaths of the land Lan's people at its hands. The crowd stifled their tears as they witnessed the touching piece, and with the strike of a gong, it was all over. All that was left were the reverberations of the music lingering in the air and a permanent imprint on the townspeople's hearts.